Now that you know how the interface of Blender works, it's time to take a look at how you'll navigate in this 3D world inside Blender. Navigation is done using a combination of keyboard and mouse shortcut. There are some visual buttons, but I wouldn't recommend using them because this can really slow you down and make your work very inefficient. So to navigate in Blender is pretty simple. You simply hold down your middle mouse button and you can rotate the view. Now this is called orbiting, but I like to call it rotating view. Next, if you want to zoom in and out, you can use your mouse scroll wheel, and this is going to let you zoom in and out. Now you'll notice that it's more of an incremental zoom, and if you want to zoom in more smoothly, then you can use the keyboard shortcut and the mouse combined. So to zoom in and out more smoothly, you hold down Control key on your keyboard and then hold down middle mouse button and then move your mouse up and down, and you'll notice that this is much smoother zoom. Now I personally use my mouse scroll wheel for most of the time, but when I'm working on something really precise, then I use the smooth zoom. And finally, to pan your view around, you hold down Shift on your keyboard and then middle mouse button, and this is going to let you pan your view. Now using combination of these three navigation controls, you'll be able to navigate anywhere in this 3D space. For example, let's say that I want to look at this object in that corner over there from the other side, so I can start by orbiting my view. So let's rotate by holding down middle mouse button, then we can zoom in using our mouse scroll wheel, hold down Shift and middle click, and move this into the center of the screen. So you can see I am exactly where I want it by just using these three navigation controls. Now we have some additional navigation controls that are going to make your life a lot easier. Let's go over this. Now often what happens is that if you accidentally move your view really out like that and you don't know where everything is, in that case you can go to this view menu, and then down here you'll notice we have frame all option, and there are keyboard shortcuts listed to the right. You don't have to remember all of these from the start, but as you use Blender over and over again, you'll be able to sort of start to memorize these. So you can click on this menu icon or you can use the keyboard shortcut. And when you do that, it's going to frame everything in your 3D scene into this view. So we have a camera, light, and this 3D cube. Another way of doing this would be to select your object in the outliner. So we can left click on this cube and then go to view, and then we can select frame selected. So this is going to frame the selected object into our view. And then we have some additional controls, like if we go to viewport, we can go to our top view, front, and right, and there are keyboard shortcuts listed here. Some of the important ones are pressing 1 on the numpad to go to the front view, and if you look in the top left corner of the viewport, it says front orthographic view, and then you can press 3 on numpad to go to the right view, and 7 for the top. And you can go to the opposite view by holding down Control and then pressing 1, so that's going to be back, and then holding down Control and pressing 3 on the numpad, it's going to take you to the left view. Going back to the perspective view is pretty simple. You simply hold down middle mouse button and you can go back to your 3D perspective view. And finally, a visual way to navigate in this 3D space would be using these gizmos on the right of your 3D viewport. So you can click on any of these different axes and it's going to move you to that particular view. And you can also left click and hold here to sort of orbit or rotate the camera. And you have this magnifying icon. You can left click and hold here, and then you can zoom in and out. And then using this hand icon, you can pan the view. Now I don't like to use these because when you're editing and working on complex objects, you don't have time to like go back and forth between that. It's going to really make it an inefficient way of working. Finally, there are some settings that I'd like to go over that I like to turn on when I install Blender. So if we go into edit menu, and then at the very bottom we have our preferences, and let's move it to the center of the screen. So down here we have navigation tab. Let's go to that, and then here I like to enable this depth function. Now let's close this window, and we have to see this. So by default, when you hold down middle mouse button to rotate the view, what happens is that it rotates around an imaginary point in the center of your screen, and it rotates like that. But oftentimes what happens is that when you have when you sort of move out in this area, and then you start working on your model, and you can see how it sort of rotates around that empty sort of imaginary point. Now I don't like to use that. Instead we can make it work a little better by enabling this depth function. Now what it does is that if we close that, now wherever you middle click and rotate, it's going to rotate around that point. So now you can see that it's much easier to do. And another thing that I like to do is that if we go to preferences, down here we have zoom to mouse position. So by default it again zooms into that imaginary point in the center of the screen. So if we enable this function, now what happens is that it's going to zoom in wherever our 3D cursor is, wherever our mouse is in this 3D space. So we can zoom in here, and if my cursor is down here, I can just zoom in here. So it's going to make it much more easy. So these are the two controls that I like to turn on when I install Blender. So that's how you'll navigate very easily to any place you want in this 3D world inside Blender.